McGrath comes in, it's on its way, it's there! The miracle on grass!
Owen with a kick to full forward, Cloak, not quite, Blair, Collingwood back in front.
The seed, he delays the give, Franklin, this is Buddy Franklin! This is the greatest showman! Poor fans can't bear to watch. They led by 28 points at one stage, but the perfect storm has erupted. Oh, who else? McDonald.
All right, now things are kind of settling down. We're a little bit removed. We're a couple weeks now removed from the grand final, or I guess just a little over a week, and it really feels like it just happened yesterday. I'm sure you Melbourne fans haven't stopped watching the replay, haven't stopped celebrating, and are still acting like it's what was it, 1963? Yeah, he's still partying like it's 1963, so congrats to you guys. Hopefully you haven't done anything too crazy there, but having a good time, because a celebration like that deserves to be happening. It's going to happen all off-season, I'm sure, but of course we already broke down everything you need to know about the 2021 AFL Grand Final and the rest of the finals. So if you haven't checked out that video, first off, if you have, really do appreciate that. Your support this whole season has been absolutely tremendous, and I really do appreciate each and every one of you lovely people. But go ahead, check that out. Of course, that's everywhere: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you get your podcast from, as well as on YouTube. We broke down everything there. But what we're doing today is a little bit of we're going back out of things, take a full look at the 2021 season and everything that came with it, whether it be we're going to take, if you want to throw it back almost half a year at this point, we're going to take a look at our preseason predictions, see what we got right, and then most importantly, get to laugh and see what we got wrong here. Then we're going to take a look at the most recent season here, the biggest surprise, disappointment, maybe our favorite game or moment. Donnie has his top 5 home and away here, and also maybe one of our favorite storylines that happened during the season. And we're going to cap things off with a little bit of an off-season preview here. Of course, we'll be dropping intermittent shows throughout the off-season as we feel needed, and especially we'll talk a little bit more at this at the end, but Donnie has a brand new series that's going to be coming out during the off-season, so stay tuned, and we'll tell you more about that here. But we're going to take a look at maybe the biggest story to watch, and you guys might not want to hear what Donnie has to say, but this team is likely going to have the best off-season. But let's get into things. Of course, I'm your host, Ross Sound, joined alongside by the fourth and long AFL correspondent, Coach Donnie Heston. Coach, how are we feeling as we're kind of getting into the craziness of the offseason already? I mean, 4-team trades proposed, free agencies going, and it's everything's already going. The season just never stops, does it? The excitement never ends.
The silly season begins very, very shortly after the regular season ends, and it gets sillier and sillier each year with the communications. It is almost like footy is 24/7, 365, because not even 3 days after the grand final, there's already trade talks, there's already free agency talks, there's already discussions, there's negotiations. I mean, we already have several players who have signed on to go to new homes. Free agency has already seen 3 or 4 players move on. We had our first big trade of the year where Collingwood again throwing around picks like they are folded up airplane, like they are paper airplanes, and throwing them off everywhere they can, hoping to make up for the mistake that they did last year in their pick swap with GWS last year. But it's always an interesting time period, because this really kind of shows what's your passion. Like, how deeply do you pay attention to your off season? Do you pay attention to who are the rumors about your club? Who are the potential additions? Who are the subtractions and all that? So it's very fascinating time of the year, especially for me, because you kind of get to know some players that maybe are fringe players, because you might need to know them because they may find themselves on your club or on a different club. So I find myself looking up names like, who is this player if I'm not 100% sure. So it's a very fascinating time of the year, and it's only going to get more and more entertaining over the next week and a half.
Oh, I'm so excited. I mean, the season that never sleeps, it's going to be a grand old time. And, of course, You can find everything Fourth and Long AFL over at thefourthandlong.com/AFL. We are everywhere. Find us on Twitter and Instagram. All the links are over just on that website. You can find everything you need there over at, once again, thefourthandlong.com. For all you MMA fans, it's taking a little bit. I know we got this fantastic footy merch I'm rocking on here. If you're on YouTube, you can see the video right now. The fantastic Tri-Blend Footy is Underrated t-shirts, but we also released some brand new Tri-Blend Certified Banger MMA shirts, and it's about damn time we got some merchandise there. So go out and want to support the show, and also at the same time I was actually very impressed with the quality of this. I know Donnie has his, and he's been happy with it. So get yourself a good t-shirt and go. I'm pretty sure we even sell in Australia. Yeah, they should be able to ship to Australia too, if I'm not mistaken. So go ahead, check that out. For everything apparel, that's thefourthandlong.com/apparel. But let's get into things, Donnie. And the first thing I want to take a look at is our top 8 predictions. There are some that were pretty accurate in here, and some that not so much. Most importantly, on my side, I did not get everything right here. But of course, for a little quick refresher, from 8 to 1, this year's top 8 look like Essendon, GWS, Sydney, the Doggies, Brisbane, Geelong, Port Adelaide, and Melbourne. I'll just let you. I'll put mine out first because I'm gonna take the biggest L on this one. I had Sydney at 8, Port Adelaide at 7, Fremantle at 6. Obviously a mistake there. If they could kick straight, maybe things are a little bit different. Port Adelaide and Sydney were up a little higher than where they finished on my list. Number 5, I have the Doggies, so I got that. Number 4, I have the Richmond Tigers. Did not get that. Number 2 and 3, Brisbane and 3 and 2, Geelong and Brisbane. So pretty close right there. The only problem is, Donnie, at number 1, I have the West Coast Eagles. Obviously, both those Western Australian teams did not work out well. And then over on your end, from 8 to 1, Freo, West Coast, so a little bit closer there, St. Kilda, Brisbane, the Doggies, Richmond, Port, and Geelong. So the top 4s weren't too bad. Richmond was obviously one of the biggest monkey wrenches thrown in there, and just anyone from Perth. Stay away.
I think we went into this season with a lot of hope because for me, Freo was a team that they had that young talent. They had played so well. They had such a defensive game, and they were getting some of their superstars back. I honestly thought they'd have a better season. I don't think anybody expected them to be absolutely snake bitten with injuries most of this entire season. I mean, Dave Mundy was a revelation. I mean, he polled 20 votes at the Brownlow, which for a man of his age, and again, this is all due respect to him, was not something anybody expected. No. So, and when one of your best players goes down with shoulder injuries and ankle injuries and can't kick straight injuries, whoops, that's not an injury. Just Freo was one of those teams that I jumped on the bandwagon. I may have paid for it, but I think everybody and their mother had Richmond in the finals, just because, I mean, 3-time premiers. Yes, YouTube comments. I'm sorry. I did say 4 and 5 in the last episode. My apologies, but thank you for calling it out. I genuinely appreciate that. If I make a mistake, I am not afraid to. So yes, 3 out of 4 titles, but I don't think anybody expected them to be injury riddled as much as they were. Along with losing Dusty for the last 5 weeks of the season really didn't help that either. But I mean, when you go at the start of the season, you're going on paper, and you're almost a little bit going on the previous season and what you expect to happen. And I don't think anybody in nobody that I've read or even seen anything from had Sydney, Melbourne, and GWS, all 3 in the finals easily. Nobody did. So that was really kind of a shock to a lot of people. I think people expected GWS to be there, but I think they expected them to just fall short, like 9th or 10th, because losing Jeremy Cameron, they keep losing talented players, and it just has not it has not played out as well since the 2019 grand final. They just have not been the same team.
Which is fair. I still do. I mean, we'll get to it. I still love my Sydney Swans call there. I mean, I should have been a little bit more optimistic, I guess, here is what it looks like.
Nostradamus, my friend, you are, because I even me, the diehard Swans fan, did not see this season coming. Again, I was pleasantly surprised. I will definitely say that.
Hey, I'll take the surprise on GWS on choking their way out of the finals.
Pretty much.
Right? So it was good there. And now, here's something that I will admit that I've been able to jokingly, but I've been able to just kind of nudge at Donnie every time we talk about Essendon this year, because here's our wooden spoon predictions. Of course, I went with one of the lowest ones last year, which was Hawthorne. I thought that aging roster just wasn't looking good, but hey, would you know, they played spoiler to a lot of teams, and they were a tough game for anyone, especially later in the season. They ended up finished 14th in the ladder. And of course, it was North Melbourne taking the win spoon once again. But here's one where Donnie, he gave himself an out because he's a little bit of a coward. I will say a little bit of a coward there, not trying to stick with it. Of course, I'm just playing. He went with Essendon, but also he gave himself the out of or North Melbourne. So I guess I'll give it to you. I guess, if I'm feeling really generous here.
You fall into what happened in the off season, what happened in the previous season. And I trust me, so many Essendon fans have really taken the Mickey out of me, and I appreciate it. I appreciate that they have long memories, and I really didn't mind being wrong on that one, because I thought Essendon had a really good draft. I think they drafted really well, and nobody can argue that they were probably, besides Melbourne and Sydney, the surprise team of the entire league, because everybody, I think so many people expected them bottom four finish. And they finished just outside of the finals with a style of play that so many people in the AFL that weren't Bombers fans started to fall in love with, to the point where I think Bombers games were getting to be the games of the round every week. Everybody's, how are the Bombers going to do this week?
I also really like how they look going into finals. I was a little worried that they might be able to make a run as well.
Yeah, they may not have been a pretty season. It may not have been perfect. Yes, they gave up points, but it was an exciting brand of footy that a lot of people loved watching. A little disappointing how their finals ended, but sometimes you use so much to get into the finals. I think they just kind of ran out of steam, and when you run into a good Doggies team in a weather conditions that I think fit the Doggies a little bit more than the Dons, I think it really was kind of the reason why Essendon. But I trust me, I wear that badge with honor that I messed that one up, and I'm glad that I did, because I think Essendon is going to be a team to keep an eye on. I agree with you. I think in 5 years, this is a flag contender team. If they can keep this team together, this is a flag contender team legitimately.
Hey, Dons fans, I'm just going to let you know right now, you will win a grand final within the next 5 years. Book it. You could be in the grand final within 3. I would say winning, I'll go 5. Let's give it that. And so, huge future there. Essendon looked great, and I mean, North Melbourne, arguably the greatest wooden spoon winner of all time, but wooden spoon nonetheless with that one. With our Brownlow picks, I guess we're a little bit off on this one too. We actually both went with Brisbane's Lachie Neale, and unfortunately he wasn't able to get full season in, so that obviously hurt him. I believe he had finished with he played in 17 games on the season. And so obviously it's a little bit less than what he did last year. One of the most obvious things there. He finished, I think, 4th on his team in Brownlow votes. So, it doesn't help. He had a lot of talent, I think. So a lot of talent on the Brisbane Lions. I arguably took away from him. A little bit of a slower year in played by some injuries there as well. And so what do you think went wrong for Lachie Neale this year?
Injuries are just something you cannot account for. But another thing that I think really kind of changed Lachie Neale's season was the emergence of Jared Lyons. Like, I think Jared Lyons really, really stepped up in his absence, and he started taking votes there in that middle time of the year when Lockie wasn't hurt. Which I think when Lockie was hurt, when you're hurt and you miss 4 or 5 games in this season, that really does derail any chances of you winning the Brownlow, because as the eventual winner kind of proved, you kind of have to be on the park and you kind of have to pull to win the Brownlow nowadays, because you've got so many guys that are they are game breakers. When you've got a Dusty, when you've got a Bontempelli, when you've got a Petrarca, when you've got an Oliver, when you've got Boak, and you've got Ollie Lyons in the league nowadays that pull a lot. And Sam Walsh too. I don't want to leave him in the Darcy Parish. Nobody expected those two to pull as well as they did. That kind of changed the way this season went. And then him getting injured, Jared Lyons having a better season, the Lions kind of having up and down sections where the first part of the year they were atrocious. They weren't playing really good footy. Then they had that hot stretch in the center of the year where it seemed like nobody could even come close to the Lions. And then they kind of tapered off for a few weeks and then kind of ramped back up going into the finals. And then, I mean, they severely cooled off in the finals, unfortunately. So it's kind of so many circumstances. They're unforeseeable. I mean, the injuries for sure. Again, you go on paper and you're expecting the superstars to play every game, and it just isn't always the way it goes. So, I mean, that's just kind of the way the kind of the cookie crumbles, unfortunately. And nobody saw Ollie Wines doing what he did. I mean, he was an absolute monster. After week 3, you could hear murmurs throughout the footy media that if Ollie Wines keeps this up, he's going to be very difficult to beat. And then he kind of cooled off a little bit when Port cooled off, and then Bontempelli exploded in that section. So it was then kind of just each and every week kind of explode. And then the Demons, Petrarca, Oliver, having seasons to remember and helping the D's win a championship. I mean, nobody expected that. But I think the biggest thing that helped Lyons in the long run was Petrarca and Oliver being on the same team. If they were on different teams, this could have been a completely different count.
Now, with this next one, we kind of go with the biggest surprise team and then the biggest disappointment here. And kind of like what I hinted to earlier with what was going on in the finals, my biggest surprise team was going to be the Sydney Swans, a team that, I mean, finished like not near the bottom, but I mean, they were kind of in like that gray area between finals and, wooden spoon. They're kind of right there. And I honestly, Donnie, I couldn't tell you why I had this feeling about the Swans. It was just one of those gut things where I didn't see analytics. I kind of knew the roster there. I was excited that Buddy Franklin was going to make his return. And I don't know, sometimes, I'm sure you guys know, sometimes you just have a gut feeling about this. I went with it, and I said that Sydney was going to be a finals team. And which, not only I said they were going to make 8, they ended up making 6 here. And so I was very impressed with the Swans. And it was something that they started off really well this season. I was like, am I going to be right about something here? Just please keep this going. And would you know? I mean, they look great. I mean, especially with guys like Tom Papley stepping up and just having a huge year. This was just this was a really good and a really exciting Swans team to watch. I rooted for them as long as they weren't playing GWS.
Yeah, this was just, as a diehard Swans fan, legitimately, I'll be honest, when you said what you said at the start of the season, I thought you were crazy. and again, like hindsight's 2020. I
Hindsight's
nobody
2021. Hey-o.
Oh,
I'm so funny.
No, nobody saw this coming. Absolutely nobody saw this coming. But I'd almost say you almost have to tie two teams, and I know a 2-team tie, kissing your brother, sister, whatever. It's so weird, but you can't not go with Melbourne a little bit too.
Mm-hmm.
Like legitimately, you cannot. You win a flag. Nobody expected you to be there. People expected you to kind of mire 9th, 10th, 11th, just miss the finals again. You've got a team, but the team has the yips. Melbourne is Melbourne. They find a way to lose games that they shouldn't, but they find ways to win. And this year they just hit lightning in a bottle. There's no other way to say it. That Coach Goodwin just literally found the perfect mixture of his players in just the right way, and it hit perfectly. He hit a jackpot. He hit the $1 million. He hit the best card on the river that you could ever get. He hit it perfect. So it's hard to argue that Melbourne is not, but Melbourne and Sydney were the two teams that I think shocked the footy world. Nobody expected Melbourne to be the dominant team in the league, and nobody expected Sydney, a team that was in 16th the year before, to draft 3 young players, but all of them make an impact at some time or another this season. And for Sydney to play so much better footy, it's mostly the same roster, except for Alir moving out and Tom Hickey coming in. It was mostly the same roster that had finished 16th the year before, but had all the injuries that they had last year. I won't go through that laundry list. It was scary to think about it, that most of their superstars, Buddy Franklin included, were healthy for most of this season. That, I think, was a little bit of the surprise to everybody, was how healthy Sydney stayed and how good a footy they played, with not only the new rules, but then how they adjusted as the season went on, when there was a little less emphasis on the man of the mark. So they had to adjust their game a little bit. They were still really good defensively, but their kicking and attacking style really fit well the way the new rules were set up. And you kind of saw the fruits of their labor from all that movement, and with Don Pike coming in and really changing John Longmire's style. I think it's hard to argue that Sydney did not have the surprising season of the year. And the scary part is they could be just as good next year.
Yeah. Hey, if anything, I think they're going to be a lot better. And watch out for that top 4 spot, because those Sydney Swans just very well might be able to find themselves in that spot. And then I'm talking biggest disappointment, at least my prediction, the complete opposite of my biggest surprise team. My surprise team definitely hit. This disappointment team, not even close. I went with the Port Adelaide Power. I thought they were going to regress a little bit this year, just because I wasn't, like, all of last season they were leading and I wasn't super confident in them, though. They ended up losing in the preliminary finals. Of course, they did that again this year, so those Port Adelaide fans do know heartbreak and disappointment by now. But Donnie, here's one I want to plug you on. Well, you might have been a little off on the wooden spoon. I was surprised it wasn't too bad. What about you calling? You said word for word that Collingwood was going to drop out of the top 8 and finish in the bottom 6, and then to finish second to last. So, you got this one.
You get the Swans and I get the Pies. I'm not sure which one's more impressive. Their off season was not only atrocious, but then their season just wild, didn't get any better. I mean, it was the proverbial sandwich for Pies fans this season, because your off season gets absolutely atrocious. You trade several really good players away. Yeah, you might have been in a cap crunch, but then there's the argument there of were they not? Yeah, who knows? But then as the season went on, it was just situation after issue, after debacle, after stuff up, after everything. Like this whole season, there was nothing that went the Pies' way. Every bad bounce that can happen happened to them. You fire Buckley after a so-so part of the year. You have injuries galore when it comes to it. You have all of the issues off the field as well with the board, which was even more that we could go into, but we won't.
We cover that like playing. That is just that could be a whole podcast on its own, man. It was something else.
A Pies season podcast could probably go 2 hours just because of everything that happened this season. Again, Pies fans, we're not picking on you, but it's the honest truth. I'm not trying to beat around the bush here. I just didn't see where the Pies were going to be successful, like some people thought, because Chalor was an impact player. Stevenson was an impact player. Our R2 Besenavallagi was also, and it was a player when he played well. And then it's just, you didn't get the impacts of the big players that stayed as much as I think a lot of people expected. Brody Grundy had a down year. Yes, he got a lot of statistics. Yes, he got into my teams of the week, but in the long run, it was a relatively down season. He really faded in those last 8 weeks of the season. Pendlebury gets hurt, has a good season, not great. Steele Sidebottom, average season, not very well. Mason Cox is invisible, and now is no longer a Collingwood player and looking for a new home. We'll have to see. There's talks of him potentially landing at North Melbourne, which would be quite interesting to see him as a Kangaroo player next season.
I think that's the worst part about real quick, Donnie. I think that's the the penultimate problem with Collingwood's season. If you're a sane person, you give Mason Cox 5 years, you make him a lifer. Okay, it's unbelievable. Give him all the money in the world because he's better than Ollie Wines, quite frankly. Of course, that's a joke. Please don't take me seriously on that one. I know someone might.
Oh, I cannot wait for the YouTube comments because somebody's going to pause that. Someone's going to pause that and angrily text him.
Wouldn't that be the worst out of context clip I've ever produced?
Oh, man. That would be absolutely classic if somebody clips that. That'd be great.
Oh man, yeah, but keep going with your Collingwood rant here.
It's not really a rant. I feel bad. Like Pies fans, as much as they get the Mickey taken out of them a lot because they're the club that everybody either love or you hate. They're like the New England Patriots. They're like the Golden State Warriors. There is no middle ground. There is no, I kind of like them. There's you viscerally dislike them or you viscerally or you completely and passionately love them. There is no middle ground, unfortunately. And that's, I think, kind of the issue that the Pies kind of run into right now is that everybody that viscerally dislikes them, they are having a field day with this. They are thoroughly enjoying it. I don't want to disrespect the Pies because I know it's a great club. It's a club that was really well run. It just ran into everything that could go wrong did. Now I'm hoping they have a better offseason. I'm hoping Nick Dacos coming in helps kind of spark things, but we'll have to see. It's not starting off well because having get all the points to be able to be sure they get Nick Dacos could really kind of put Collingwood in a bind where they're going to have to kind of chomp and change to try to be able to not only get the 3 players that you are mandatorily have to draft this season, but then after that is how are you going to handle next draft when you just traded your 2nd and your 3rd round draft picks next year to Gold Coast to get their picks this year to be able to afford to get Nick Dacos as your father-son. So it'll be very interesting to see how they maneuver that. Like, do we see a Pendlebury get moved next season potentially for draft picks? Do we see a Steele Sidebottom? Do we see a Jordan DeGoey potentially get moved for draft picks next year to make up for the fact that they had to trade some capital for next year's draft to get into this year's draft to be able to get the prodigal son that is Nick Dacos as a Collingwood player this season?
2 things about Collingwood. You said either you love them or hate them. Right now, I'm a little bit of both because 1, absolutely hate them for disrespecting the living legend that is Mason Cox, of course. And but also at the same time, I love them because I really do appreciate the high draft pick this year. You know, as a GWS fan, like that was very nice of them to just kind of collapse at the end of the season, fall to 17th there. Collingwood did me a huge favor, so I like to send my gratitude to them. Now, there we go. So those are going off of our preseason predictions there, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, we'd love to know what you guys think about all that. Whether you want to make fun of us for, especially me, for thinking West Coast is going to be that good. Go ahead and let it loose, whether it be on socials, whether it be on Apple Podcasts by leaving a 5-star review, or as you already know, in the YouTube comments. We also would love to see how your preseason predictions turned out and see if you got anything good like I did, at least here with the Sydney Swans. But let's go ahead and take a look at our 2021 review. First things first is going to be our biggest surprise and disappointment of the season. I mean, Don kind of dipped into this already, and I'm sorry if you see me moving. There is a fly in my studio right now, better known as my bedroom, and it is bugging the hell out of me. So if you see me try to reach out for something, and if I do catch it, I will scream out of excitement. So, if you want to watch, I hate this damn thing so much.
Get chopsticks. Be a Mr. Miyagi.
Oh, I wish I was that good. I can't even hit it with my hand half the time. This is an old dying fly as well. It looks like. So I'm gonna get. Hey, hopefully by the end of the show, I get this bastard for you guys. But let's take a look here. The biggest surprise for me this year, I mean, besides like the prediction, was Richmond's drop off. That came almost unexpected. Of course, injuries didn't help. But they had all the talent in the world, and they looked like they were going to keep going on with the dynasty there, and I guess it just ended up not working out. I mean, like I said, injuries. We kind of covered this a little bit, and I think Donnie might want to cover this one a little bit more a little later in the show. But I think it was just weird seeing Richmond fall apart, and I say fall apart isn't they still had a really good chance of making the finals this year late in the season. It ended up just not didn't come together for them. But like I said, this was kind of the biggest shocker to me this year, in terms of, I guess, a lack of success. That's the most surprising thing to me.
Richmond's one of those. I hate throwing them into the biggest disappointment because I don't think anybody saw everything that happened to them.
That's what I'm not going to say
going
disappointing.
to happen to them.
The lack of success was surprising. It wasn't disappointing. I think that's how I'll word it for myself.
Yeah, like I would agree with you on that. Like I would. Like it was surprising to see Richmond struggle those last 4 or 5 weeks. Again, no Dusty, so caveat given there. But even still, weeks before they had played, they had played without Dusty and had played well. So there could even be questions of, is Damien Hardwick's style that so long kind of shaped the AFL that everybody was, we need pressure, quick, small forwards that are going to do everything, yada, yada, yada type of stuff. This year, it kind of got exposed a little bit. This year, they got burned several times with that style because teams figured out how, once you get past that initial first couple stages of pressure, once you get it outside the 50, Richmond is exposed defensively.
Yep.
If you are accurate with your kick and you attack them, you don't hang back. And I think that's the kind of thing that I think teams are starting to figure them out. So it'll be really, really interesting to see next year. Do teams employ that same style, and does Hardwick make adjustments to maybe pull back the pressure just the tiniest bit to give him a little more coverage behind the first level of pressure, so then that they can cover in case the ball gets past that first line? Because unfortunately he would have 2 lines of pressure, but once both of those are beat, now they're number disadvantaged, and a good kicking team like what Sydney did in round 4 really exposed their zone style of defense. Because if Grimes can't come off an intercept mark, if they're hitting short, quick kicks into open space, which is then letting leaders into gaps, that can rip this Tigers defense apart because they're not structured to play one-on-one defense there. It's a group team style, almost zone-ish type of defense. So that was kind of the thing. I'm interested to see, how does Hardwick adjust? Does he make an adjustment? Do teams try to use that style more? Now, not every team is like that. I mean, what Sydney did was incredible in that game in round 4, and not every team has those type of elite kicks. So it'll be very fascinating to see how that goes. But them and Fremantle were 2 of the teams that honestly I felt horrible for about halfway through the year, because injuries just killed them. Just absolutely killed them. Oh, I felt so horrible. I mean, we have so many Dockers fans that you and I talked to.
I felt bad having to lambast them every week.
And it really, really wasn't their fault. I mean, they had just had so many injuries going into the season, and it just never really got better. When one would come back, 2 would exactly. Unfortunately, but that might have been because of the lack of depth behind the first 22. I think that might have got them the biggest. But just you felt horrible because it felt like one would come back and two more would drop down to the injured reserve. They were never, I don't know if Fremantle saw their best 22 on the field at all this season.
No. And that, I mean, for any team, if you're never able to see, like, your 22 best guys at just any point of the season, that's pretty tough. So obviously in a tough spot there for either team. And you can't predict injuries happening. And so, I mean, kind of in the same sense as where my biggest disappointment is obviously going to be West Coast, in the same sense where they had a lot of guys back, but there's also a lot of points where it seemed like they were missing half their roster. and that was, not only did they fail to live up to expectations, I guess you could throw in the, we can make the excuse for injuries, but even when everyone's healthy, they still failed to live up to expectations. They had just a hot and cold season where they look good at Optus, looked horrible on the road, and even times what made the season worse is that they had games where they looked bad at Optus. And so that's why they're kind of my biggest disappointment there too. And hopefully they're able to pick things up next year, at least for Perth. I mean, I think both teams, both of those Perth teams, in Freo and West Coast, I think they have a lot of potential for next year. Are they going to put together? I only time will tell. I don't, like, from what I've said before this season, I'm just going to stay away from that. I'm not touching Perth with a 10-mile stick on this one. I'm just going to let things play out and just go as it is.
But like for me, I would almost want to go with like this. Like I'm gonna put Collingwood aside because I kind of expected that. I'm gonna put Richmond aside again. I wasn't expecting the injury. Same thing with Freo. My team that honestly I think was the most disappointing was the West Coast Eagles.
Yep.
Because even with some of the injuries that they had their opportunities to make the finals and they stuffed it up royally.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I cannot believe some of these games that they lost. Mm-hmm. And then I was just like, are you kidding me? The absolute destruction against Geelong down in Geelong, the absolute destruction again in Geelong when they played Sydney. Nobody expected either of those results at all. Nobody did. And it just, I don't know what it was this season, but just the Eagles were so unimpressive in so many ways for a team that was there in the finals for a good chunk of the season. I'm thoroughly disappointed with how it ended because that was a finals roster. That was a finals list.
Easily.
And they stuffed it.
And,
legit.
I mean, not even making finals, man. Being one of the most hyped teams before the season and you can't even make it into the top 8. That's bad. That's real bad. That's the kind of bad where it doesn't take explain. That we all just know that's universally just bad. I mean, not great stuff from West Coast. Hopefully, those fans are able to see a little bit more success next season. I just want to see them good because I mean they're an exciting bunch. They're an exciting bunch over there, and we'll see what we can get next year though. Ultimately. And now I want to give you, before Donnie gives his top 5 home and away, I just want to we're going to go into our favorite game or moment this year. And I think I kind of talked about it last week. My favorite game ultimately is going to be the GWS Sydney one from the finals, just because we mentioned it last on the show. You can hear a little more in-depth breakdown about that. Of course, it helps I'm a little biased as my favorite team in there. And they win. And so that's always going to do it for me on a huge stage. But that was a fantastic game. But I think I guess a little more non-biased one, it could still be a popular pick here, but I'm going to go with it. One of my favorite moments was the after the siren goal from Captain Max Gawn for the Melbourne D's in round 23 there against Geelong. They get it done, and not only do they win their first minor premiership since was 1963 there, which of course they then go on to win the finals, but it was just such a cool moment for one of my I think my favorite non-GWS player might be Max Gawn at this point. And so it was really cool to see that. I mean, that was just a fantastic game of footy in general, let alone that moment that really was one of the climaxes of the entire 2021 season.
Oh boy. So for me, it's going to seem kind of weird, but two of the things that I think that are my moments of the year are not actually specifically field situations. Okay. And let me explain here. Western Australia, I'm going to give you a tip of the cap because you saved the AFL season with being able to host the grand final. But there were two. Dream time at the G, Essendon, Richmond, incredible atmosphere, incredible game. Legitimately was so happy to see that game played there for the rich indigenous heritage and at the West, out in the West, for them to be able to host the Dreamtime game. The Dreamtime game was absolutely incredible. Both Richmond and Essendon played their absolute tails off and an incredible game.
Yep.
But that was one of my moments of the season because I think Dreamtime doesn't just have to be at the G. Now, I understand the G is massive. It's 100,000 people. It's great. But seeing it in the West was incredible. You cannot put words to how incredible the Welcome to Country was, how all of the performances, the indigenous performances, and everything that was there, the celebration of indigenous culture before that game was incredible. Hands down, one of my moments of the year. And the other one is the grand final in the West. I think it turned out absolutely amazing.
It's beautiful.
I know
Optus
there's a ton of people in Victoria going, no, but it turned out absolutely fantastic. Okay. I have heard Victorian media saying they think potentially this could be something that could be done once every 3 to 4 years, that it rotates in different states to be able to make it a national game and a national way to resolve it. Now, it's going to be hard considering they have a 50-year contract in the MCG, and the last 2 years they've extended the contract with the MCG, so it's now 2 more years longer. So we'll have to see how that goes. I don't see the MCC wanting to break that contract, so I don't think it'll happen anytime soon. Unfortunately, we may be dead and buried before that particular contract gets signed. But I have to say those were two of my favorite moments of the season, was both of those absolutely spectacular games that everybody usually expects in Victoria, both being in the West, and the West Coast fans and the Perth fans absolutely embracing it, selling both games out, giving us an incredible atmosphere. So my moments of the year are those two incredible games out in the West. Again, hat tip to all of you out in Western Australia and in Perth. Thank you so much for at least giving us a great crowd atmosphere in those two games, because it absolutely made the season with both of those games. Now, to go off of that, I had it prepared last week, but we had so much fun to talk about that I thought we'd save it for a week, since this is a season review. And this is my top 5 games from the Home of the Way season. I originally did this because it was kind of around the final series. And in the final series, unfortunately, the 2 1-point games really were it. I didn't want to put those in because they did kind of come on at different times. So here are my top 5 in order, 5 to 1. The top 5 games of the season. Number 5, let's go to round 10, where Adelaide and Melbourne at the Adelaide Oval, and the Crows get the upset. Yes, some people would say a little bit of controversy, Coach Hess, with the no deliberate out of bounds call, but Melbourne going down for the first time in the season to a Crows team that was near the bottom of the table, was not playing well. The incredible atmosphere at the Adelaide Oval was absolutely fantastic. A 1-point win, that was absolutely incredible. It's hard not to put that in,
especially for possibly who they're playing for there as well.
Exactly.
That
we go to number
off the field stuff really played into it. I mean, sorry for interrupting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, you're good. Number 4, we go back all the way back to round 1.
Wow.
Hawthorne V Essendon.
Love it.
1.
Yes.
Hawthorne makes the incredible comeback to beat the Bombers by 1, Hawks by 1 in the round 1. Absolute thriller. First game of this season, which would show kind of Hawthorne's season, that they would be kind of known for their great comebacks, including doing it later on in the season as well. But an absolutely incredible game of football. Cannot deny that was one of the games of the round. We go to number 3, and you'll notice the final 3 games of this have one thing in common. I think everybody's going to know this. Number 3, Brisbane versus the Collingwood Magpies, round 3, Lions by 1. Zach Bailey gets the after the siren goal to win the game, to kind of save Brisbane from some early season troubles when they had not played well in the first couple of the games. A Pie team also wasn't playing well, but an incredibly good game all in all. But Brisbane getting the after the siren win by 1 kind of riding the ship a little bit before they would go on their monster run the rest of the year. We jump to number 2, and it's hard to argue this one. Round 14, Bulldogs v Cats, GMHBA Stadium. Gary Rowan gets his second ever after the siren goal as the Cats win by 5, as Rowan double bends a kick from the pocket to knock off the Bulldogs, and it kind of at the time solidified the Cats as a potential top 2 team. It just an absolutely incredible game. The Dogs go out to a nice little lead. DeLong storms back and gets the win after the siren. An absolutely fantastic game.
It's good stuff.
And it's hard not to argue this. Number 1, Melbourne v Geelong, round 23. D's win by 4 as Max Gawn gets the winner, gets the minor premiership, which would eventually lead to the D's winning the entire thing. An incredible game of footy. The Demons with the incredible comeback late. The Cats kind of falling apart late, but just an incredible game of footy. And it just showed the gall that Melbourne had this season. They just never gave up this year. What an incredible. And then I'll throw this out there. I have 5 honorable mentions because there were so many games when I went through this. I think there's only 3 rounds that I literally went through round by round going through it. There were only 3 rounds where there wasn't a game decided by 10 points or less. 3 rounds where there wasn't a game decided by 10 points or less. That's incredible. Including round 23 that saw two games within 5 points. And that was both the top 2 table teams, with Port Adelaide getting the 1-point win over the Doggies in a sloppy but still absolutely entertaining game. Here's some of my honorable mentions really quickly. Adelaide St Kilda, round 13. Riley Philthorpe gets the kick over his head to win the game in the wet weather up in Cairns. An incredible game that was. West Coast v Richmond, round 13. West Coast gets the Friday night thrilling win by 4 over the Tigers, which kind of, I think, started the Tigers' decline as the second half of the season came on. The Hawthorne comeback train the second time as Hawthorne versus Adelaide, round 6. Hawthorne comes back from down. I think Adelaide kicked the first 13 goals in a row. Hawthorne wins it by 3 with a late goal. Richmond versus GWS, round 9. The Tigers win by 9 after the whole nightclub incident. Rioli gets the game winner in a game that was on national TV here in the States, and I thought it was an absolutely incredible one. And you're going to smile about this, Ross. My 5th and final honorable mention, GWS v Sydney, round 5. The Giants go into the SCG and get a 2-point win to kind of right the ship after kind of an ugly start to their season.
You only say a kind of ugly start. That was an atrocious start where we're talking about maybe Leon Cameron's fired. So that helped.
I absolutely remember that when we were discussing that, but that really did kickstart GWS's season and really did kind of get them back on the right path. Absolutely. And led to a team that eventually would make the finals. So I know everybody's like, it's like he didn't put a Sydney game in there. Why didn't he? Because I went through it. There was a couple of Sydney games I could have snuck in there. I could have snuck the Essendon game, both Essendon games, the 3-point win in round 3, and then the Sydney, I think 7-point win or 13-point win over, or 7-point win over Essendon late in the season. But it's hard to argue some of these games were not absolutely incredible with after the siren kicks, late goals to win the games, and just absolutely incredible atmosphere. So I tried to stay away from the homer calls there. In fact, both of them, including the 2 finals games that we both saw Sydney lose in the 2 games that I had written down. But just an incredible season again. I loved that, so many close games. It was absolutely fascinating. I'm hoping next year's just as good, because that was awesome.
If next year could be like, half as good here. Wow. Oh, is that a second fly? Oh no, this is unbelievable, folks. I'm just not having a good time right now. I'm getting swarmed. Oh, just you wait. As soon as I get off the camera,
fly, don't bother me.
Hey, I'll have you know, as soon as I get out this camera, I'm grabbing that fly fire. I'm ending both of these. I'm gonna get him. I'm gonna get him good. Let's get things
off. Watch it. There may be children.
Let's get things off with our 2021 review, ending with our favorite storyline. And Danya, I think you might like this one, and I think this was a really fun one for a lot of people to follow along with, especially Didn't quite reach it here in the finals, but we were definitely watching along there when they were playing GWS. But Buddy's quest for 1,000 didn't reach it this year. I mean, more than likely, unless something crazy happens, is going to be able to get it next year. But I thought that was a really fun one to watch because there were points in the season he was kicking like 5-6 goals a game every once in a while, and man, he had the golden. He just kind of had one of those golden legs. If he played in more games this year, he probably has 1,000. But I mean, I thought I had the blast just trying to pay attention to that, and I was really rooting for him.
Yeah, if you'd asked me at the start of the season if he would have made it, I was highly skeptical.
Mm-hmm.
But when he came back in round 2 against Adelaide, kicked several goals, I was like, he's got a shot. And then he kind of had a couple of games where he only kicked 1 or 2, which I think kind of stifled him a tiny bit. And then being sat out late in the season, I think really made sure. But it does bring an intrigue to next season because it's going to be all over the news in those first 3 rounds.
Mm-hmm.
When is he going to kick 1,000? When is he going to kick 1,000? When is he going to kick 1,000? Are there going to be fans there? Is it going to be at the SCG? Is it going to be on the road? Are the fans going to be able to rush the field when he kicks 1,000? Mm-hmm. There's a tons of questions there because I mean, I've said it and I will continue to say it. We're probably looking at the last person that's ever going to kick 1,000 goals in the AFL era. I hate saying it, but careers are far too short. Mm-hmm. And unless they really change the rules to where the full forward comes back in vogue, where they're kicking 6, 7, and 8 weekly, I just don't see 1,000 happening because the next closest person past Buddy that's active is only at like 600, and that's Rewalt. Mm-hmm. And he's 2 or 3 seasons from retiring, and I don't think he's kicking 400 in 3 seasons.
That's quite the claim, Donnie. Now you never know, but safe bet there. I love that, and man, I can't wait to see Buddy kick 1,000. That's going to be that's just going to be a really, really damn cool sight. For anyone that's a fan of footy there is really going to appreciate that one. But let's wrap things up here with a couple of biggest things. Just want to take a look at a little preview of what we might be able to expect from the offseason. So Donnie, I want to hear from you your biggest story that we should all keep an eye on this offseason, and also your prediction for who's going to have the best offseason. And of course, this is one that I've been hinting a little bit earlier. A lot of you guys might not like this answer, myself included.
All right. The storylines for the offseason, honestly, will be how active is the trade period? Because with COVID still being an issue in New South Wales and Victoria, you've really seen the trade requests be more of family oriented. Jordan Dawson leaving the Swans to go back to South Australia, most likely the Adelaide Crows, which will be interesting to see how negotiations go with that. Adam Chera wanting out of Freo, wanting to go back to Victoria, which most likely he'll be at Carlton next season. How's that going to go? Henry from the Geelong Cats wants to get out of Geelong. Less about family, but more about getting midfield time, which sounds like the Freo Dockers is it. Sam Petrevsky-Seton wanting out of Carlton to go back to the West Coast. How that going to do? So I'm really interested to see how that goes. The free agency period was relatively most of the players that we expected to moved. Kelly moved, Hewitt moved. So we're kind of there aren't any magical superstars. I don't see a very active trade period. I relatively see kind of quiet, but you just never know. I mean, maybe a player surprisingly gets put on the table.
Oh, don't want to interrupt you, Don. I caught one of the fingers. I caught the fly.
Awesome.
I told you.
Mid podcast and he Mr. Miyagi's me.
Oh, I caught the fly with my fingers.
I love it.
Oh, you want to see that? Oh man, I am remarkable. There's the evidence right there. I'll drop it. Would you look? Yeah. Carry on, please, Sonny.
Man, that's absolutely incredible. But just I'm very interested to see how that goes. Like how does the trade go on? What does the draft look like? How does all the draft picks pan out, compo picks and everything like that? Like this draft could be quite interesting. It's not a massively deep draft. It's not a years before where 10, 12 guys could play next season. Really, we're looking 4 or 5 could play next season. Dacos, the kid Francis from South Australia, potentially Luke Darcy's son, maybe 2 others. I think potentially could play next year. I think a lot of these picks are going to be kids that are going to take some time developing in the twos, and then we may see them in a season or two. So it'll be very interesting to see how this draft goes, because talk that I've heard is next year's draft could be quite a group, but we'll have to see how that goes. And then team that I think
oh, this is good.
Boy,
this is good.
mid podcast, he's become a human fly swatter. This is awesome. And here we go. The comment section is going to be fun. Who's the team that I think is going to have the most interesting offseason or best offseason?
It's GWS,
honestly, ladies
right?
and gentlemen,
right, please.
It'll be the Richmond Tigers.
Ooh.
And the reason I say the Richmond Tigers is because yes, they lose a few players. Yes, they lose Basher Hooley. Yes, they lose two defenders in the back line, but they have, if I remember correctly, could potentially have 5 picks in the top 35 picks. They're going to get some talent. They're going to get it into that system. And if Hardwick can keep that system going, he's got a little bit more depth now to work with that I don't think he had this season. And who knows, maybe they package something to move up and get an even better talent. So if I'm the rest of the league, I don't like seeing that Richmond potentially could have 3, if not 4, potentially top 30 picks.
That's ridiculous.
On their roster going into next season, with potentially having Dusty back, a relatively healthy lineup, and the players that they did lose were players they can afford to lose because the draft picks they pick in give them young talent to supplement the players that have left over the last 3 or 4 seasons. So I think Richmond potentially could be the scariest team when it comes to the draft in the offseason, because they could come back with a nice loaded roster going into next year.
Love it. They're already a really solid team. And they don't even need this help, and they're already getting sacked. Shout out to you, Richmond fans. I know we have a few of you guys that follow us on Twitter. See you in the comment sections every little bit too. And so one season down, you get a full off season to prepare, and watch out, because might have to put them right back into flat contention, to their joy and to the chagrin of every other team in the league. So thank you, Richmond, for just being that thorn in our side that's just never going to go away, is it now? But ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here on our 2021 season recap. Of course, took a look at our preseason predictions here, 2021 in review, and take a little bit of look at what we could expect from this year's offseason. And like I said earlier, we're going to be doing intermittent shows throughout the offseason, but to kind of supplement that, Donnie is introducing a brand new series. Of course, the way he did last year in the offseason, he interviewed American AFL fans. Now it's a little bit of a twist on that one. Donnie, explain what we can be excited for this offseason.
Well, last year I thought since we had a lot of Australians that kind of got into the channel because we were talking Aussie Rules football, I wanted to kind of experience and kind of wanted to showcase that there were a lot of American fans that are Aussie Rules supporters and AFL club supporters. So I did my fan series last year where I interviewed US born fans or supporters of each of the 17 of the 18 clubs. Unfortunately, Gold Coast was still a very, very mysterious creature that I could not
Gold Coast fans that only exist because we think they do.
Okay, so this season, as kind of a more homage to the history of the game, I am doing an Australian fan supporter series. I am in search, as we record now, of finding fans from all of the 18 clubs that would be willing to sit down and have a chat about your fandom of your club, how you got into it, whether it's a family club, whether it's you decided to be a rebel and pick a different club, what all memories you have, who's your favorite players of the past, who are your favorite players currently, what was your favorite game you ever attended, and just kind of chat footy with you about your club and your thoughts of maybe this season, your thoughts of next season, your thoughts maybe even of the AFLW. So I kind of want to have a chat with Aussies about the sport. I want to learn more about each of these clubs. I may be a diehard Swan supporter, but I love learning about all the other clubs. I love learning from other fans. So I am really looking forward to it. I am in the process of doing that right now. I'm having a blast. I think a lot of people are very shocked that a dear old Yank, as I've seen in the comment section, wants to know about footy and is knowledgeable the way I pride myself on loving this game. And so I cannot wait to do this. Keep an eye on that as well. Keep an eye on, I have a couple of irons in the fire with potentially AFLW players sitting down and having a chat with me. I know Collingwood and Gold Coast both have expressed interest and having a player sit down and chat with me via the internet, unfortunately, since I cannot get down to Australia in any way. So I'm really looking forward to that. So do keep an eye on the Donnie's disposal sections, because I'm hoping to put out content over the off season until the AFLW gets started, which I cannot wait for. One more year with only 14 teams before we go to the 18, sir. So it'll be fascinating, but I will definitely be trying to keep the footy content over the off season just as prevalent as it is in the regular season.
And it's going to be a damn good time. And not only, I mean, Donnie has to be over the internet. Who knows, once you guys starting now can help us grow to be the, not only the footy, but the sports empire that our goals obviously are. And, just $1 a month, we might be able to get a little bit more towards that just by going over to patreon.com/4th-and-long. Of course, there's a bunch of goodies that come with it as well, depending on what tier you subscribe to. There's my plug. And, oh, man, I am getting better with them. But, Donnie, let's wrap things up. Of course, the way we know best. Your thoughts on the 2021 season. Might be a tough one, but your thoughts on the entire season in one word or phrase.
Outstanding, absolutely outstanding season. The AFL, again, I said it in a previous episode, the AFL, to be able to get through this entire season with only a few tiny hiccups. There was no massive layoff. There was very few games that had issues, and the games that did, they were very quick to be able to find a way to get them in. It stunk that there was no games in New South Wales for Sydney or GWS. It really kind of got hard for the Victorian crowds because they weren't in Vic. But to get all the games through, to get them through without a hitch, and to get this season through, I got to do it. An absolutely outstanding job of the AFL. And to the players, outstanding season. The new stand on the mark rule, I know we absolutely crapped all over it at the start of the year, but I think it made for a very interesting game by the end of the year, because it did open up the play. Did it open up scoring? That's up for debate. But I honestly, I enjoyed the footy. I really enjoyed this season. I'm sad to see it over. This is always the worst time of the year, because there's no footy now for at least 2 months for me. At least I have the AFLW to come. I'm looking forward to it. I know not everybody's that way, but I'm really looking forward to it, because I think it's only progressing. But this is the hard time over here. It becomes our winter. So I know, I think you have the same issue, Ross, is it gets snowy and there's not much to do. So to be able to chat footy and to be able to see this game is absolutely fascinating. So
definitely going to be snow. I guess we're expecting
season for the AFL.
Yeah, right. I guess we're expecting Snowmageddon. So I guess to clean off the sidewalks, just might have to put on little Toby Green highlights, and that might be able to melt the snow there a little bit. Oh, man. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in today. Not only today, but on the season as a whole. It was my first full AFL season. So to this be my first one here, I really don't think of a better one that I could have joined, and it's just been fantastic. And for whether maybe some of our American subscribers that just see this stuff posted on YouTube and over on the podcast, for the fans of like maybe the NFL stuff, the MMA stuff, thank you. If you want to check that out, I highly recommend checking out. At least look at the highlights over on YouTube, because footy, it will blow your mind, and I guarantee you'll fall in love with it just like I did. But like I said, ladies and gentlemen, an outstanding season. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to catch our AFL Grand Final recap if you haven't already, and we'll see you throughout this offseason.